Welcome to the Builder Straight Talk podcast with your host, Michael Creaso. Get the unfiltered truth from the trenches of construction, real estate, and funding. This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.
Hey, Kyle, my new friend from North Carolina. Thanks for taking time out today, my friend. Appreciate you being here and sharing your vast wisdom with our builder audience today. So before we get into this, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
All right. And we're just prior to the call here, I got to ask, your mom's doing okay too?
She's doing good, yeah.
All right. Most awesome. Okay. So you would be the third generation builder in your family. I take it grandfather, father, then you?
That's correct.
Okay. So the die was already cast. You're either going to be an Uber driver, stripper, or a builder.
That's it.
But you didn't go right into building. You went to university first?
That's correct.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that. What was the mindset? And then what did you glean from university that you're applying now in your building career?
I wish I could say a lot, but I think the most learning experience just comes from hands-on experience in the field. I would say maybe organization and management, type of task. Probably I learned some from school, but most of the hands-on stuff and, the everyday lessons that construction could teach you is where I learned most of it.
I don't want to say it was a waste of time, but was it a waste of time?
Waste of time.
All right. So since we've opened the store and we're talking about education, do you see now in the trades, because I think the number that I heard is for every 5 that are retiring right now, because the trades are aging out, we're only getting 1.5 into the workforce. And my guess is a lot of it has to do with the stigma. Because when I look back to when I was in high school, we had I don't want to call it community college, but across the street, we called it, that's where you go when you can't learn anything, right? And in retrospect, that's where you should have gone, because those guys that learned how to use their hands in a trade are the ones that are coming out of school making 6 figures. Why the ones that are coming out this generation with a degree in gender studies or whatever dance theory are gainfully unemployed. They can't find employment. They're living in their parents' basement. Am I kind of accurate with that? What's your feel on that?
You're absolutely right. I think it's a real problem, and I think it's such a complex issue. For the last 3 decades, most parents have told their kids, and it's understandable, right? You don't want to do hard manual labor. You don't want to be on a ladder. You don't want to be on a roof. Go to college, get an education, work in an office, work in the air condition, all of the things. Well, we're now paying for that as a whole, because as the labor market continues to get tighter and tighter, the cost for that labor is just going to go up, right? Supply and demand. We need more houses now than ever, but we have less workers now than ever. So it's a real topic. And, if you really look at the meat and potatoes of why that could be, it could be, job security, it could be health benefits, it could be maybe even worker safety, right? Maybe a lot of these younger kids have a misconception, that everything in construction is dangerous. And, I think we need more local level outreach, bringing back carpentry programs, bringing back mechanical programs, welding classes, reaching out to the community colleges and things of that nature to try to gear up some younger talent. And the younger generation being so technologically advanced compared to our generation, I think that they can bring some new insight as well to the industry.
Yeah, I want to touch on that in a bit. We'll talk about the technology and how that's changing building. I would think this kind of goes right back to grade school. Again, I'm dating myself. I'm 60 plus. So, I earned this face over time to look like the shoe that I am. But I remember in kindergarten, we had big, gnarly building blocks and planks that we, build like, a fort out of. And I would say that we were more inclined to use our hands and do stuff. And then definitely in shop class, we had shop class, like in grade school and high school. Girls had home ec, guys had shop, but you were already getting, I guess if you want to call it, your hands dirty and getting used to what you could do. And I think by removing that at such an early age, kids aren't even exposed to it until it's too late.
That's exactly right. I 100% agree.
Wow. So what do you think is the fix for this? Like, obviously instilling it early, but are there any programs that, for example, in North Carolina, like outreach, are you going to high schools and trying to encourage kids to come out, maybe like a quasi apprenticeship, spend a day on a build site, any of the above?
Yeah, so we actually have taken in a couple of interns the past 3 years from colleges, and the interns are doing like construction management. Um, and the problem is exactly like, from my experience, um, they see the paperwork side of it, but they don't really see like the hands-on side of it. So I almost feel like if they're in their, junior and senior years of college, and they want to do like an internship, which they have to do to graduate, from what I understand, at least here in North Carolina, they have to put in so many hours per summer as like in an internship. So I think to really solve the problem, you almost have to start back, like you said, in grade school and high school, and try to talk to the younger generation a little bit earlier on. But the real solve comes from within. I mean, we have to, be better at communication. We have to be better at worker safety. We have to be better as an industry. We have to make it attractive for people to want to work in the industry. And, until they feel that, I don't think we'll ever really see it tick up out of that like 5-to-1 or 5-to-2 ratio.
It's almost like we have to come up with a marketing campaign that shows working with your hands into the trades is cool. Right.
Yeah.
And I think the other part too, to spill the myth that, it can be hard work, but then if you apply your smarts, I mean, you could come out, do your apprenticeship, let's say as an electrician, right? You put in 3-4 years, then you hire a couple guys under you, and you can scale that pretty quickly to create your own business. So if you don't want to be turning a screwdriver or pounding a hammer, you could be the logistics behind what's happening, and you've got people working for you. And very quickly, and this is probably the part that they're not hitting home enough, that you could come out with an education and not be in debt, making money, and you could be living that American dream. And the other part, I mean, once you've got a skill, man, you can be employed anywhere.
Absolutely.
Like you'll always have the ability to have a job. I don't want to call it a job. You always have a career that's going to sustain you and your family.
Absolutely. I've always told my wife that and my family that. I said, I can go anywhere and build anything at any time on the planet, in my opinion, right? Because I feel like I have a certain skill set and I can apply it anywhere in any region. I may have to learn how they do it or learn how they build, because obviously it's different by area, but that's what I do. So I think achieving that skill set early on, and then just honing it, fine tuning it, and taking it the right direction, depending on whatever that particular person wants to do with their life, I think they can make a good career out of it pretty quickly. All right. If they just knew that it was an option.
Let's do a quick lane change here. There's something you said that you could work anywhere around the world. And I know that you're an ardent traveler. And I would wager that probably through your travels, a lot of what you've seen in other countries, you've applied to how you're building now in North Carolina. Is that a fair thing to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any particular countries that really stand out that you were able to glean certain architectural things or styles and designs that you brought back?
Sure. So I particularly love the, Japanese way of doing things, right? Like they take so much pride in their work. Everything is just like pinned and doweled and notched, and it's amazing. But the reality of it here in this state, there's not much market for something like that. Whereas opposed to everybody really wants more of like a modern looking house right now. So I definitely apply a lot of like my European travels to that. There's a lot of more like modern styles in Europe, frameless cabinets, more simple, clean lines, things like that. Not a lot of trim, and I think that I see that more now than ever in this area.
Does that make it more of a cookie cutter style though? So you're losing the originality of a home for expediency?
Absolutely. The older homes, the reason why I love older homes, the Victorian styles, the colonial styles, is they had so much character, right? Every single house had so much character. And we've gotten so far away from that. And don't get me wrong, like the lights under the open stair treads is cool and the glass handrails and all that stuff is cool. But homes today just do not have the love and character that the older homes have.
Yeah, I have to get your ass up here. I live in a 150-year-old train station.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we ended up doing, it was a banquet hall when I first bought it. And we ran the banquet hall for about 5 years. And then I had this epiphany as my consulting business took off. It's like, why am I letting strangers into my house? Because literally that's what it felt like whenever we did a banquet. And then my parents announced that they were coming up for Thanksgiving one weekend. And it's like, oh, what do we do? And we just move furniture around. And the part that served as the hall, banquet hall, we moved furniture in there and there's a big stone fireplace. And it became the de facto living room. And I liked it so much. I said, all right, we're done. We're done with the banquet hall. And as I could afford it, I tossed a grenade into one room and we reno it and kept going. And then I made the mistake. I was working as a consultant. My background is real estate. I've been a realtor since '89, but I've been teaching agents for the past 10 years how to do video marketing with their cell phones. And I was just coming back from a U.S. tour, and every hotel that we stayed in had these magical rain head showers, so it felt like you were naked in the Amazon. Yeah. And I wanted one. So what started off is I was thinking it's going to be a 3-day reno. It was like one octopus after the other. Like even opening up the bathroom, the ceiling would have been about 8 feet across, 12 feet wide, so rectangular in shape. When I took the ceiling down, there were 14 junction boxes up there. So why that place didn't burn down to the ground, I have no idea. But that opened the door to, okay, let's clean that out. Well, what's behind this wall? We'll clean that out. And then the contractor I was working with said it would make more sense if we took out the dividing wall because there was a washroom on the other side, and that's what served the banquet hall. Okay. So we took that wall out, which then exposed the stairs going to the second floor. And he said, those stairs are not code. And this is the phrase, and I hope you never use this, but it's instilled in the fleshy tablets of my heart because I've never heard it before. If you ever decided to change your stairs, this would be the time to do it. And I've never heard that. Never heard that, combination of words. And so I looked him right in the eye and said, if you can put post and beam in there, I'm interested. And he said, yeah, I think we can do that. And that turned into a 3-year project, because we're like two little kids. And so this may tie back into what you're doing, with home building and custom home building. We didn't have a plan. And we are like two little school kids in the toy store with no, what's the word I'm looking for? There was no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow because we had no idea how we wanted to finish this. And everything became an open sore. We had walls open, mechanicals open, and I had to live through that for 3 years. So take us back to what you're doing in your design style. And when you're working with people that want to build that ideal home, I take it that you have to counsel them, take them by the hand, and walk them through that entire process. Otherwise, divorce is waiting on the other end?
That's funny because the first conversation I ever have with clients, I tell them, if we're going to build a custom home together, it's a marriage, right? It's going to be ups, it's going to be downs. You're going to love me, you're going to hate me, but at the end of the day, we're going to figure it out. So it's you're exactly right. If you don't have a process in place, a pre-construction process in place, a design, right? So we have our own design service, architectural engineering, all the way through the permitting process. And essentially we do exactly that. We hold their hand, we show them their options, but we kind of ask the right questions, to get the right answers to try to develop a plan that basically maximizes their quality of life in their home.
Do you find that there's a lot of instances where they've got the dream of what they want, but you have to kind of tug them back down to earth and say, here's the reality? Yeah, absolutely. We can have a glass staircase, but does that occur quite a bit?
100%, almost every time. A lot of people don't truly understand everything that construction costs. They look at what is the cost per square foot and what is this and what is that. But what about the cost of the land, the development of the land, the driveways, if it's more rural, if it needs septic systems or well systems, all those things can just drastically change what a project costs per square foot. Same thing for a kitchen, right? I built 1,000 square foot house for a Michelin 3-star chef, but she spent $300,000 in her kitchen. So her cost per square foot was almost $1,000 when we were all said and done. So she basically dropped $980,000 on 1,000 square foot. But then I have like the economical, more spec side of it, where if it's just boxed and cookie cuttered, of course it can be in that $180, $200 a square foot with the land and everything. So it's all over the place. But when someone comes to us and they say, oh, we want this and this and this and that, and we want it like this, in the very, very beginning, I think it's very important to talk about money, right? Because money is what makes the business go around. Have they been pre-qualified? Do they have a budget? Do they already have financing in place? Are they bankrolling it themselves? Can they provide proof of funds? All of those things play a factor into it. So.
Yeah. Well, even, the reality of let's talk about a cookie cutter home for a second, right? So as a builder's perspective, you've built 30, 40, 50 of these, what your costs are going to be. And you're probably within 1%, 2% of error. You know exactly what it's going to take. Then they say, hey, by the way, what if we were to move the bathroom over here? Or what if, let's just start off with what if, fill in the blank. What they don't realize, every one of those what ifs means going back to your plan, architecturally looking at it. What's the impact of that? Can it be approved? Now, because of one change, do you have to reroute the electrical or the mechanical? And so there's like this snowball effect. So when it comes to what you're doing with, and I don't mean to be derogatory by saying cookie cutter, but do you minimize the amount of customization that they can do on a home like that?
Yeah, in an economical sense, you almost have to. You almost have to limit the choices. I definitely love custom home building more, just because there is a little more, choices out there. Because I get bored building cookie cutters, but from a cost and estimating and plan perspective, they're absolutely the easiest. Because when there's a client involved in the beginning, there is no magic bullet to a blueprint. I mean, you just have to keep working at it. And again, like you said, if you change something, everything changes. A house is like a million pieces all working together, and that bathroom wall might have a low point in it. So, okay, we've moved the bathroom, but now we got a post in the middle of the room, right? Well, how does that work? Well, then we have to upgrade to LVL beams and, so many other things. So it's like, it is a snowball effect because, a house is comprised of a million different moving parts. And when you want to just move one little thing that seems so simple to someone who doesn't know the industry, it can drastically change everything.
Yeah, it's kind of like pulling a tiger by the tail. You think it's nice and fluffy till the whole beast turns around and stares you in the face.
That's right.
So do you give them, again, I guess in terms of the customization of, there's got to be a better word than cookie cutter, but you give them the ability, obviously, to pick up their cabinets, kitchen features, all that kind of stuff. So in reality, they do feel like they're being able to put their thumbprint, their originality into the home, but within the confines of your plan and staying on budget.
That's exactly right. Like flooring is a great example, like we'll put a budget, low and high, medium for flooring, and then let them pick through those selections. Same thing with kitchen cabinets and, the different levels of countertops. So they have a little bit of customization, from that perspective. The industry kind of calls it cookie cutter. At this point, I call it attainable housing, because affordable is out of the window.
No.
In my opinion. So, when they say that an average house costs $500,000, well, I don't think that's affordable for a police officer, a firefighter, a teacher, those type of things. So I call even the cookie cutters in today's world, I call it attainable housing, because that's exactly what it is.
I like that. I think we're going to I'm going to steal that one. I think affordable housing is basically a cardboard box under a bridge right now,
That's
unfortunately.
right.
So, and especially with the demand, I think the latest one was if we were building 1 million homes a year, the envelope of opportunity now is 25 to 30 years, full on. But then going back to what we said at the beginning, we don't have the trades that are replenishing themselves. So yeah, I'd want to dwell on that, but I really like being able to walk into my home, turn a tap, and water comes out. I really like that I've got cold food in the fridge, and then there's electricity. And we're losing those people that make all the magic happen that we take for granted.
Absolutely.
Let's jump back here a sec. So third generation builder. When did you? I take it then that you worked with your dad. Is that kind of how it worked, or did you start off on your own right off the bat? Take us back to that.
More or less. I mean, he made me go through the ringer from the ground up, and learn the trades basically. So early on, I toted shingles up a ladder. I framed. I was on a trim crew. I did manual labor for a couple of years in different areas to really just learn the trades itself. And then I kind of transitioned more into, the management side of it. And then I learned the architectural side of it and AutoCAD and, all of the things that go along with it. I'm not a licensed engineer, but I see plans so much and I've built in this area so much. I pretty much know looking at a plan if it's up to snuff or not. Or I say, hey, what about this or what about that? So it's all been just a long life lesson, and I learn things every day. And I think that's why I love construction the most, is because it teaches you something every single day if you let it.
Oh, there's learning something new. We'll touch on the technology, or there's also a fire that you've got to put out. I take it now that you're not actually swinging a hammer. So let me rewind that. Is your company more of a management company now, or do you still have employees that go out and do the stick framing and everything else?
So we used to keep in-house crews, like the hard stuff, right? Framing, foundations, roofers. But most of those guys are dead, died, or retired, right? And then the younger guys have their own businesses, but they all want to be subcontractors. So in today's world, 90% of what we do is subcontracted work, and it's just based on construction management. So I call us a management firm more than anything, because essentially that's what we're doing. We're trying to manage chaos. It's kind of like herding cats most of the time, but that's what we try to do.
At what point? So if I want to put this back to a builder that's listening in right now, and then let's say they're doing maybe a dozen homes a year, and they want to take it to that next level. At what point, let's say within your evolution, did you realize it makes more sense for me to start outsourcing a lot of this, and then, as you said, focus on the management side to be able to pull everything together? Was there like a aha moment? Was it a financial decision? Like, what was it that motivated you to finally say, this is the route that we're going to take?
Yep. I would say quality of time and freedom. Was kind of my driver behind it. I mean, I was just like every other business owner, right? Like, people think they're going to open their own business and set their own hours. So no, if you're going to run a successful business as an owner operator, you're going to work 70, 80 hours a week for quite a while. And I think years into it, I came to the realization that I got to a point where I was just spinning my wheels, because I was simply trying to do everything all on my own. And, I brought in someone to help me with business development, and they kind of opened my eyes to seeing how, we set better processes in place, procedures in place, hiring the right crew members for the right jobs, and, how each one of those could take such a load off of what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. And that really allowed me to grow and expand.
I think that's the $1 million answer right there, or learning moment, that you need processes in place, systems and processes, because it's duplicatable, repeatable, and you can almost assure what the quality is going to be at the end.
That's right.
Just like a pilot getting into a plane, they don't just fire it up and head down the runway. They got a checklist.
Yep.
And no matter how many hours they've been in that plane, it always starts off with the checklist and they go through it. I would assume it's the same with you before you start a build.
100%. For the more basic homes, we have what we call a 287 point checklist. And it really just takes every single thing from start to finish, that a superintendent can have, the clients can have access to, the project managers can have access to, all of the things. And then as it goes up and gets more customized, we have one right now that has about 550 checklist items, but it's also, 12,000 square foot home. So it's a whole different monster. So you have to put a process in place. That doesn't mean that, again, it's a magic bullet, right? A silver bullet. I learn about my processes every day and how to improve them, or, what if this happens or what if that happens, and how do we, basically adjust or navigate that? Because every house is different, and that's what makes it difficult to have like just the same process for every single thing. But I think if you have the general concept of it and you have someone smart enough to apply it, it can really change everything. Because not every house is on a crawl space, not every house is on a ICF foundation, not every house is on a basement. So all those things could kind of drastically change a checklist. And I think that's probably the key to it, is being able to identify and understand, what you should be applying to that particular job.
Well, I think it's interesting that you're sharing that with your buyer, like your client, because in real estate, I was using something called the 93 turbulences, right? So I would describe it as, okay, we've sold your home, right? So either I'm representing the buyer or the seller, but either way, there's a transaction in place. Now we're waiting for closing. And I would tell them, this is where the work really starts, because like a duck on the surface, the duck is just kind of floating, but you don't see he's kicking like a son of a bitch below to keep ahead of the current. So here are 93 things that could potentially go wrong before you actually get the keys or you move on. And I would go through them, right?
Yeah.
The appraisal doesn't come in, the appraisal is undervalued, insurance issues, like you name it. There are 93 things. And
Absolutely.
I said, they are going to come up, not necessarily all of them, but it's going to happen. And when it does, and you pick up the phone and you're in a panic, I'm going to say, go back to the list and look at item number 10, right? So what I'm doing is I'm setting the expectation by letting them know that we're going to try to make this as smooth as possible, but shit happens.
Yep.
Right?
It absolutely
But now
does.
they're prepared for it. Right? And I kind of look at what you're doing with your checklist. Are you using sort of the same way that it's almost like you're preparing them ahead of time for things that could and eventually do go wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we build like a Gantt chart, like a schedule around it as well. We go, hey, look, in the early stages, we're a lot more prone to having delays for weather and rain and things of that nature, during those foundation stages. And we're going to build in X amount of days for weather or other problems we run into. We have to get the soil tested. We have to go back to engineering if there's a problem and get it amended. So that, in the early stages, I try to set the tone that you can expect some delays if something happens pretty early on.
Yeah, it just froze on me there for a sec. I'll edit that out. In terms of the building process that you're doing now, are you more of a spec?
No, I do custom the most.
Yeah, you're coming through really pixelated. Like it's actually, we should have checked internet speed. Don't worry about what I'm saying here. I'll cut all that out, but we should have checked internet speed before we started. Let's go back. Okay. Let me ask you this, Cal. How many homes on average are you building a year?
It varies, depending on if we're going to do some spec or we're going to do some townhouses, and mix in with like custom. From a custom home perspective, $2 million and up type of homes, it's probably 12 to 15. I would say the bulk of the other was like 20 to 25 projects, probably fall under that $2 million range. So we're averaging somewhere around 40 to 50 projects a year.
Okay. Are you developing your own land? Are you going through the process of buying, developing, and then building, for lack of a better word, small neighborhoods? Or what's your process?
Yeah, we look at that. And Raleigh is such a competitive market. There's little to no land left in Raleigh at all. So we're looking at the smaller towns that kind of surround the city of Raleigh. Garner, Fuquay-Varina, even down towards like Wilson and things like Clayton. So kind of the small, like mom and pop towns that still really, really have like that North Carolina charm to it. And we're purchasing land and trying to build, quality homes, but not at the scale of something like D.R. Horton, where they shove 1,000 homes, on 200 acres, and they're all eighth of an acre lots, because I'm never going to build any house, whether it's attainable or whether it's fully customized. That the financial part of it doesn't matter to me. In this aspect, I'm not going to build a home that I wouldn't live in. And that includes the land, the placement, the development, how it functions. So I really kind of think through all of those things. I guess you could say I'm more of a perfectionist in that regard. So I'm a little bit slower in terms of like subdivisions, because I really try to think through it, because you never really know who your buyer is going to be. You never really know how it's all going to work. So I try to think about, common areas and how the roads work and all of the things, just to make everybody's quality of life that much better.
Yeah, there's something about having a neighbor. I put a steak on the barbecue and they can reach over and flip it.
Yeah.
That doesn't really sit well with me. I would think, so Raleigh is the economic hub. You must be pulling in from New York, people moving from West Coast that are looking, for lack of a better word, like a country lifestyle. Like Raleigh is the economic hub. But how far are you building from Raleigh? I'm guessing like within an hour radius?
No, the whole state.
Really? Wow.
We build up in the mountains. We build down at the coast. We build in the northern parts, in the middle, and the southern parts. I try to focus on finding the right client. And that's really big for me, because like I said, it's like a marriage. So, at any given time, we maybe have 50 to 70 leads a week organically come through our website, but I probably don't even talk to 10% of them. Most of them are dreamers. Most of them I can send off to like architects or engineers, or, try to start a pre-construction or a design process. And I kind of focus more on the people who have their ducks in a row, so we can have intelligent conversations and I can decide, just as much as they want to choose the builder, I want to choose my clients, because to me, that's one of the biggest like fail safes you can do as a construction owner, is to be very choosy about who you work for, because not every client is a good client.
Well, you hit it right on the head at the beginning. This is a marriage, right? So it's a long-term relationship, not only as you're building the home, but after the fact, because if you do it right, they become your raving fans to tell the people. So let me rewind this. What are you doing then to attract potential new clients? You mentioned the website. Does that mean you've got somebody that is focused on the SEO and online marketing? Do you have another division that focuses on, I don't know, print ads? What's your secret sauce, if you will, for marketing and getting clients?
We do have our own in-house marketing firm that basically works on our SEO, works on our organic. I'm not an ad guy. I don't do Facebook ads. I don't do Google ads. And it's mostly really because I just don't need it. I think if you're first starting out and you have to get ads to get eyes and get foot traffic and things of that nature, then that's probably what you should do. I stay away from, Home Advisor and Angie's List and all of that stuff, because to me, that's all just throwing, good money at bad, because you never really know what you're going to get. I think the secret sauce, more than anything, is still word of mouth. I mean, when from a builder's perspective, it's very nice to get, Christmas cards and birthday invitations and all of the things that my clients send me. I mean, I still get Christmas gifts from people I built houses for 10 years ago, and they still call me, they still email me and check in with me, that's the type of client that you want, because that client is going to reach out to so many more people on a natural level. And that's how you build a business.
Yeah, I think there's a thing that many builders forget or don't realize is the impact that they have. It's almost like saying ground zero in a positive way, because as the head of the crew, right? You've got your trades that you're paying. The money that you're paying them now affords them a lifestyle that they can go out and buy a home. All the suppliers that are relying on you, the restaurants, and it's like this big snowball effect in a positive way of everybody that's downstream that's affected because you put that first nail into a stick. But then when you flip that onto the other side from the buyer's perspective or the home buyer's perspective, not many people can put aside, $30,000 a year. And I'm using, let's say, a purchase price of $500,000. Your average appreciation right now is about 5 to 6%. So cowboy math, 6%, 500,000, that's 30,000 a year in equity that they're building up. I don't know about you, but that would be tough for me to be able to marshal away 30 every year. And then jump forward 10 years, you've helped them accrue like almost $500,000 in equity that they would have never had. And so, like, to me, that is a gift that nobody really talks about, that you're helping to build a home, a roof over their head, family memories, but you're also building this legacy, family legacy of wealth that they can now pass on to their kids, or when they sell, they can now retire from. And again, there's such an impact that builders have, and I think we almost take it for granted.
I 100% agree. Equity is a real thing. The costs are going to keep going up. I always try to tell my clients, you design and build for tomorrow, not for today, but you try to keep it on budget for today, and then tomorrow you'll be happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, talk about budget. Let's say we kind of alert to the technology and things that are happening in real estate. What are some of the things that you see happening right now from a technology point of view, be it AI or different designs, different materials that are starting to have an impact? And where do you see it kind of going, let's say 5-10 years from now?
Sure. I think it's a lot of technology going on. I think it's a lot of innovation. I think it's a lot of startup companies trying to do different things. I give credit to Boxable. Boxable is based in Nevada, and they sell this, what they call the casita. And it's just like a 1-bedroom house that folds out with a crane, and it's ready to live in 45 minutes, So I think that's a very cool thing, because, we do have a housing crisis. We do have population rise in a lot of areas with not availability of homes. So, they're innovative, right? Is it the best, coolest thing? No, but it's a very economical, smart way to approach it. So I definitely give a lot of credit to Boxable for being innovative. I give a lot of credit to Icon, which is in Austin, Texas. They're a 3D printing company. They just successfully done 100 homes at Wolf Creek, and essentially their 3D printing machine is basically ran by one man with a tablet, right? And that kind of all goes more to like trying to attract the younger generation. I don't know any better way to do it, because everybody jokes, is there an app for that, right? There must be an app for that. Well, to be able to 3D print a home in 5 to 10 years from now, it truly might be an app for that.
Yeah.
As far as AI, sorry, because I didn't answer that. I see some good ideas. I think you can very quickly go in the wrong direction. I see now more than ever resumes that are written by AI, right? I see now more than ever. It's just that break of human touch, in a way. Like, I can just tell by the way someone did an email, by the way they written their sentences, by the way they submitted their resume, and it's all AI. So I think right now at such a small level, it can harm you more than help you. But I do think in the long run, if we ever can get a handle on it, I do think AI could be wildly successful.
Yeah, you can never accuse me of AI. You can tell by the amount of mistakes I make in one sentence, let alone a paragraph.
Right.
Let's scratch the surface on this a bit more, because I'm intrigued by this concept of the printed home. Because when I first heard about it, I was trying to get my head around a 3D printer. You know, it's the size of the HP I got in the background. It's like, what are you making, little Lego bricks? But then you sent me a link, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing that you've got this big gnarly machine that comes out. It's literally making the walls, but it's not just one machine. You could do this to scale. There could be 3 or 4. So tell me a little bit about this, because I know this is what you're kind of steering towards now that gets you excited. So give us a bit of the backstory of that and where you see this is going to go and the impact in North Carolina.
Sure. You know, I think it all kind of goes back to my roots, and that may sound weird in a way, but you know, I want to feel like I can build an attainable house for the average American, for the average teacher, for the average mom, for the average police officer or firefighter. And you know, as material rises, as lumber rises, and lumber is not really a sustainable material long term. We're doing pretty good at it, but it's not. I think that we have to change and adapt. And I think that's what makes me so excited about like 3D printing. It's a multi-generational home. And I don't think, and which is a whole other topic, but I don't think builders really think about and build for multi-generations. You know, so 3D printing offers, you know, basically fireproof home, which was just proven, you know, harshly in California. There was a subdivision where every house in the subdivision burned down except the 2 3D printed homes. You know, 3D printed homes are fireproof. They're way better at windproof, hurricane and tornadoes. And that's mostly because you can put, you know, designs and waves in the wall with the printer, and that breaks the wind, you know, way better than like a square box does. So there's a lot more studies and stuff that will happen and come out. The insulation factors of 3D printing are so much better. You know, you already have just such a high R value in a home just because you have 10-inch thick walls. But something that is very interesting, I slept in House Zero in Austin, Texas when I was down there. And I can't describe how comfortable I felt in that home. I had the best sleep of my life, and you wouldn't think so initially. But it gives you kind of a weird sense of security, in a way. And it makes you feel better. It really does.
Is it sound density too? Like I would think, how thick are the walls? They're probably 2 feet?
They're 10 inches thick.
So what does that do for sound, ambient noise from outside?
Great. Can't hear nothing.
Wow. Wow. So in terms of the actual build, once you've got your site, let's work with a concrete pad versus a basement. So your plumbing stack, everything is more or less waiting. Then the machine comes. So do you call it a printer, an extrusion? What do you actually call the beast that shows up?
Yeah, I call it a 3D printer, but
okay.
Yeah, I've heard all kinds of names for it, but yeah, essentially you would start just like any other traditional slab. You'd have your, you know, grading done, your you know, underground plumbing done, get your slab poured. And then you can maybe only print the exterior walls. You can also print the interior walls while you're there. I think it's really cool to print the mailbox while the printer's there and print some flower beds around while it's there. I think it's a pretty cool thing. But it ultimately, that's what it is. It's a 3D printer.
So so I've got the vision of what it looks like. This big, for lack of a word, like it's almost like a big arm that's going across, and it's extruding the mixture. How are you feeding that machine to keep up with it? Is that manually done? Are you opening up sacks of stuff, or how does that part work?
Yeah, so it's really more of like a container, and the container, which is kind of where all the brain and everything is behind it. That's what's controlling the speeds, you know, because when you're 3D printing, you have to look at your mixture, your flow. You have to adjust the speed at how fast it's printing. And equally, when you hit a corner, depending on if it's a square or a circular corner, you may have to speed up or slow down the printer so it can make the turn, so you don't lose that integrity of that layer, and it kind of gets more mushy as it's sloshing around. So you have to be very conscious about things like that. But the material, essentially, if you imagine a 40-foot shipping container, and it's full of the material that you just fill up with like a front loader from the back, and essentially that container stays there. It all the hoses from the printer and the power hook up to this container, almost like a mobile unit. And essentially you just kind of go and it's two parts. The printer is the magical part, right? Yeah. That everybody loves to see, but this is kind of how it actually works. And you just kind of have to move that component with it, or simply get a longer hose, just to carry it. If you're going to set up a couple of like material style containers at the, street access of a job and like a big subdivision, you can stage, have a staging area, have all the material containers full, and then you can run 4, 5, 10 printers at a time.
What do you actually call the stuff? Like, it's not concrete. It's like, what do you call it?
A cementous mix. Yeah. It's not concrete. It's got a lot of fiber in it. It's got a lot of different things in it, just depending on the area and the region. The fan,
because the formula will vary depending on region. So it's temperature sensitive or climate sensitive in that respect?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think if you really think about human civilization, we started out in, mud houses, right? We were building from what God gave us. And I think that's something that, in a weird way, because technology is so advanced and 3D printing is so advanced now compared to that time, to compare the two. But if you think about our military, and our government is looking heavily into 3D printing bases and bunkers and things like that. They want to be able to go ahead and test the sand, let's say in Saudi Arabia or Iran or Iraq, and they want to see how that natural material that they can pull and derive from that region mixes with the, mixture to achieve the right consistency. And they do that because if you think about the logistics of it, it's not logistically or economically possible for us to just send like cementous products across the water, right across the pond. So we have to find ways to use basically what God gave us in those regions. And I think that 3D printing is going to explore that in a big way.
So right now, would you say, if you're comparing a printed home to a regular built home, in terms of cost, material-wise, it's more or less the same, give or take, but the real saving would be in time, because you can frame up a house probably in 18 hours to pour it, and then you probably have a prefabricated roof that you can drop on top. So within a matter of days versus months.
That's right.
So your real savings is going to be in the labor long term.
It's going to be in the labor. It's going to be in the time. That's where the savings are. Like materials side by side, or tit for tat. Maybe the 3D printed walls side by side versus just a 2x6 wall. The 3D printed walls, more expensive. But there's so many other components to it. It kind of goes back to what we talked about. There's a million pieces to a home. Your R values are better. You don't need as many mechanical units, things of that nature. So you have savings in so many other places that you wouldn't necessarily think of. You don't have to paint it. You don't have plywood that's going to rot. You don't have to worry about water, intrusion. So it's very, I think it can be very beneficial in a big way.
I think this takes us back to what we talked about right at the beginning, also from the labor perspective, because you don't need the same amount of manpower if you've got a guy with a tablet basically steering the beast.
That's right. Yeah, and once you get your formula and your mixture correct, and you've printed, let's say 1 or 2, and you made sure all the speeds work, because you can program the software to pick up and slow down in those corners in those areas. So if you think about, once you are on that site in that area and you figure out the exact formula for that one house, so you may have to baby the first house a little bit more, but once you program it into the software, you can just turn them on, and they never stop. They can run 24 hours a day. They don't care if it's nighttime or daytime. They don't care, whose birthday it is. I mean, it's just so many other things to it. And the quality of the home. I mean, I think that's something, because people obviously care about the cost and what it looks like side by side, but you're going to get a lot better quality, multi-generational home that's sustainable, that will last for 100+ years in the same price point. Even if it was, let's say it was 20% more, it's not, but let's say that it is, it's still worth the upgrade, right? I mean, it truly is an upgrade. Now, I mean, obviously there's cons to it in a way. The older generation would say, oh, well, I don't want a machine to take my job. And in their benefit, they were correct. But in today's world that we live in, the world has evolved and we just don't have that same amount of labor force. So we have to find ways to innovate.
I was going to say the same thing. Unfortunately, the older generation doesn't have a say because they're retiring.
That's it.
Right. So there's a void that's got to be filled somehow. And it looks like technology will be the thing. My question is,
technology and government, without the government relaxing zoning, with, all the red tape, all the things that come with it, that, I could spend more time and effort trying to get a permit than actually build the home. The building is actually the easiest part. So I do think that government involvement at local, state levels, maybe even federal levels like ICC, building code type of levels. But until they're more open to change and they're more willing to relax this red tape, especially in zoning, no matter what, we're never going to be able to catch up.
Yeah, it seems to me that you're probably spending 5% of your time in cost dealing with red tape and bureaucracy than anything else. Like up here where I live, it's kind of like the recreational heartland, if you will. And they were experimenting with bales of hay and building homes out of bales because you've got like 3 feet across. The R value is spectacular. So they build the frame, if you will, with the hay, then they chicken wire it, and then put like a stucco over top, right? And they thought, oh, this is wonderful, great. But then when it came to trying to get insured, insurance companies didn't want to touch it. When it came to financing, banks didn't know what the hell it was, so they weren't coming near it. So although on paper and in theory, because they built a couple of these things, it looked great. They performed well, but they couldn't take it to market in scale because nobody wanted to get behind it from political, financial, and insurance. They held it back. Are you finding the same is happening then with 3D printed homes? It's just a matter of time before they get it around their head that this is obtainable, as you would say, and sustainable?
I think so. And I think as more and more people become aware of the pros to 3D printing, the more pressure those agencies will have at trying to get something pushed through. I do know that ICC is actually talking about the first 3D printed building code, and they've kind of went through 3 preliminary meetings already. This one is kind of like the meat and potatoes of it, and the ICC kind of sets the standard in a lot of ways here in terms of building codes. So that would be a pretty major takeaway for the industry overall. If that gets passed through, because then states can start to adopt it. Now, some states are more willing and open to innovation than others. North Carolina is, it's a great state. I grew up here. I love it. So don't get that wrong, but it is what they call the Bible state, right? It's in like that Bible district, and it's just very conservative and very old fashioned. And, it's kind of like that mindset, like, well, we've always done it this way. Well, that doesn't necessarily make it always right either, right? But, until some of that changes here, it's going to be challenging. But I do think that there are people in these different governmental positions that are sensitive to the matter, because I'm certain that they have family that need a house. I'm certain that they may need a house. I'm certain that they may need an attainable house. And as more and more people, it's all about communication and education. As more and more people learn, talk to each other, and educate themselves about, hey, these are the options we have, and put more pressure to try to get things pushed through.
I think as it catches on, maybe Hollywood gets behind it. You see more of them in movies. It becomes more socially acceptable in that respect.
Yeah.
And my guess would be Texas is leading the way because that's where you found out about this. Once they have, for lack of a better word, let's say they've got a subdivision or two that have already been built and you can see that it's sustainable and it actually works. I think that will help create the awareness. And I think that's where you are right now behind the eight ball. It's that phrase that you said that this is the way we've always done it. That's the definition of insanity. You do it the same way every time and you expect a different result. Well, okay, we're doing the same thing, but we're not getting more people into homes. Well, duh, it's because you're basically, I don't want to say you're insane, but that's what the outcome's going to be because you're not willing to try something different.
That's actually one of my favorite quotes from Einstein. Yeah.
Man, I want to touch on financing for a second. So right now, when I asked you predominantly, are you a custom build versus spec build? And you kind of broke up there, so I didn't really hear what the answer was. Is it like 60-40, 50-50? What would that be?
It's probably 50-50 or 60-40, somewhere in that range of custom homes versus spec.
So when you're doing your spec, like what is your metric when you're looking at a project? Like how did you determine this is something that you want to pursue? How do you factor in what your profit margin is going to be? Like, do you have something in place? Like we were talking about systems earlier. Do you have that same type of approach before you take on a project?
Absolutely. I look at first the location, right? Look at the land, look at the subdivisions or neighborhoods or houses around it. Look at the infrastructure. I look at the supply and demand. I look at how many houses are on the market. I look at how many people are moving to that area. I kind of use that U-Haul tool, which is kind of a weird way to look at it. But, people use U-Haul and Penske more than anything here. And it's very interesting because it's a free tool that you can use to really track where people are moving from and to. And it's so many factors that go into it. I kind of know what my price point is for the build. So when I'm looking at a project in the early stages, I kind of set that to the side and I go, okay, what are my other challenges with this lot or with this location? And how does that play a factor into my overall sale price?
Well, historically speaking, you already have a good idea of what homes are selling for in the area. So if they're around 750, you're not going to drop in $2 million homes because that ain't going to work, right?
That's exactly right.
In terms of the financing aspect, what's the deciding factor between, or let me even ask you if you are doing this, are you using the house money versus getting investors versus going traditional lending? Is there any one that you particularly go towards or you kind of work with them all?
Well, I'm old fashioned. My granddad always said, if you couldn't buy it, don't buy it and don't use credit. Right. It's like that was his mentality. I would say I self-fund a lot of things. Now, don't get me wrong, depending on the level of the project, we work with one particular investor that we like a lot, that we have a great relationship with. We have a couple of traditional banks that we can reach out to or venture capitalists we can reach out to. But essentially that all kind of plays a factor into your profit margins and things of that nature. So if I can self-fund a project, I'm obviously going to make more money on the backside because I'm not paying points. I'm not paying, interest on loans and things like that.
Right. All right. Well, I think, we've covered a lot of ground here, young man, in the past hour we've been together. Anything that you want to touch on that we haven't?
Yeah. I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and what you do in construction and the business and, what's your take on it?
Yeah. So I got pulled into it kicking and screaming because every time I try to leave real estate, it calls me back like an ex-girlfriend. Yeah. How many kids do you have? I don't know. I'll let you know. Yeah. Back in 89, that's when I got licensed. So my career path was a whole eclectic: bouncer, bartender, teacher, like you name it. I think I did it all back then. But somewhere around 1989, I got my real estate license, and that's what I threw myself into. 3 recessions later, I guess around 2005, 6, I stumbled across a guy from Atlanta, Georgia, of all places. He was doing audio interviews, right? And he found a way to be able to take audio and put it onto the web. And you got to remember, back then, we didn't have podcasting. That term didn't
100%.
exist. The internet was at its infancy, all right? And so to be able to press a button and sound is coming out of your computer, like that's like black magic, man. But so anyway, I used this little piece of software. It created the little buttons that I could put onto a website, and now you could hear an interview. And I started going after all the major CEOs in real estate, so David Liniger, Remax, and all that kind of stuff. And I created a page with their heads on it. I hadn't met any of them. And then I sent out invites to all of them. And what they would see is their little headshot, but then they would see 9 of their competitors going, holy jumping. Well, if they're on there, I got to be on there. Why isn't this guy interviewed me yet? And so it created that illusion of, I better get on there, or I'm going to miss the bus, right? And so the first one was David Liniger, and that went really well. And I got hired by a publication called Broker Agent News, and I became their VP of Business Development. And through creating content, then I grew their magazine, which was print, and their online base, which was a newsletter. And then about, 5, 6 years after that, I saw video was starting to make its way onto the web, and I wanted to find out more about that. And so in each case, I was ahead of the curve, if you will. So when I started the interviews, I was that interview guy. That was my handle. Then I got into video, and I thought, this is the future, the multimedia. And then I started teaching realtors how to use their cell phones to create video. So, the big thing is not anybody can sit there, but there's this fear from their brain to the finger to press record. I'm too ugly, I'm too fat, I'm too hairy, anything with a 2 out front of it. So my job was to dispel that fear to get them actually doing it. And that became like an awesome career. And then through the course of selling real estate and doing this and doing the interviews, I interviewed a guy probably 2017, 2018, and he owned a real estate. He catered to real estate agents. They had a 1-800 call center, and you would buy an 800 number, and you would put that onto your for sale sign, and there would be an extension. So you dial that extension, and magically a voice would appear and be the realtor telling you about that home. Well, same thing. That's like black magic. How do you make that happen? And you could hit the pound sign, and a fax would be sent to your fax machine. Like that. That's how far back this goes. Anyway, back in December of last year, that guy that I interviewed, his name's Gary Elwood, called me up and said, hey, I sold off my company, and I'm the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, of a company called Sound Capital. And our specialty is we lend money to builders, right? And what makes us different, we're not bound by the same regulations that banks are. We have more latitude. And when we guarantee funding, that money is actually frozen. So the builder doesn't have to worry about halfway through that the Fed stepped in and said, hey guys, we're over leveraged in builds. We have to stop. And then you're screwed on the build side, right? So there was a lot that they were doing with that company that I liked. Their values were aligned with mine. I liked where they were going in the building trade. And the focus was on, with this podcast, is, Michael, we could do it in-house, but we'd rather have you do it. Are you interested? And that's basically the genesis of Builder Straight Talk, following their tenets, which were, how can we get information out to builders? And that's what I'm doing, speaking with guys like you, like taking your experience and digging down and trying to find those golden nuggets, if you will, that we can share with other builders that they're on the fence. Maybe they want to take it to that next level, but they don't know how to get there, right? And I think Tony Robbins had that expression that success leaves clues. Well, I'm hoping that I don't create a crime scene here. I'm hoping that I can, glean enough information for you to share with them that they can have successful careers, right? And then, obviously too, that I'm trying to introduce Sound Capital to a whole new generation of people that are out there. So that's kind of the upside. But I've got a question for you. We've been together now for an hour, and you've been interviewed several times. I know that. If you were sitting here behind the microphone talking to yourself, and I'm sure there's a number of times you're talking to yourself, what would be that one question that you want to ask that nobody's asked you before?
Well, you're right about one thing. I do talk to myself. Every time I need good advice, I talk to myself. That's a joke. I think it would be very interesting if someone asked me, because I don't think anybody's ever asked me, why do you do it? Why do you? Yeah. I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and what you do in construction and the business, and what's your take on it?
Yeah, so I got pulled into it kicking and screaming because every time I try to leave real estate, it calls me back like an ex-girlfriend. Uh, yeah, it's yeah. How many kids do you have? I don't know. I'll let you know. Yeah, back in '89, that's when I got licensed. So my career path was a whole eclectic: bouncer, bartender, teacher, like you name it. I think I did it all back then. But somewhere around 1989, I got my real estate license, and that's what I threw myself into. Three recessions later, I guess around 2005, 6, I stumbled across a guy from Atlanta, Georgia, of all places. He was doing audio interviews, right? And he found a way to be able to take audio and put it onto the web. And you got to remember, back then, we didn't have podcasting. That term didn't
100%.
exist. The internet was at its infancy, all right? And so to be able to press a button and sound is coming out of your computer, like that's like black magic, man. But so anyway, I used this little piece of software. It created the little buttons that I could put onto a website, and now you could hear an interview. And I started going after all the major CEOs in real estate, so David Liniger, Remax, and all that kind of stuff. And I created a page with their heads on it. I hadn't met any of them, and then I sent out invites to all of them. And what they would see is their little headshot, but then they would see 9 of their competitors going, holy jumping. Well, if they're on there, I got to be on there. Why isn't this guy interviewed me yet? And so it created that illusion of, I better get on there or I'm going to miss the bus, right? And so the first one was David Liniger, and that went really well. And I got hired by a publication called Brokerage News, and I became their VP of Business Development. And through creating content, then I grew their magazine, which was print, and their online base, which was a newsletter. And then about, 5-6 years after that, I saw video was starting to make its way onto the web, and I wanted to find out more about that. And so in each case, I was ahead of the curve, if you will. So when I started the interviews, I was that interview guy. That was my handle. Then I got into video, and I thought, this is the future, the multimedia. And then I started teaching realtors how to use their cell phones to create video. So, the big thing is not anybody can sit there, but there's this fear from their brain to the finger to press record. I'm too ugly, I'm too fat, I'm too hairy, anything with a 2 out front of it. So my job was to dispel that fear to get them actually doing it. And that became like an awesome career. And then through the course of selling real estate and doing this and doing the interviews, I interviewed a guy probably 2017, 2018, and he owned a real estate. He catered to real estate agents. They had a 1-800 call center, and you would buy an 800 number, and you would put that onto your for sale sign, and there would be an extension. So you dial that extension, and magically a voice would appear and be the realtor telling you about that home. Well, same thing there. That's like black magic. How do you make that happen? And you could hit the pound sign, and a fax would be sent to your fax machine. Like that. That's how far back this goes. Anyway, back in December of last year, that guy that I interviewed, his name's Gary Elwood, called me up and said, hey, I sold off my company, and I'm the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, of a company called Sound Capital. And our specialty is we lend money to builders, right? And what makes us different, we're not bound by the same regulations that banks are. We have more latitude. And when we guarantee funding, that money is actually frozen. So the builder doesn't have to worry about halfway through that the Fed stepped in and said, hey guys, we're over leveraged in builds. We have to stop. And then you're screwed on the build side, right? So there was a lot that they were doing with that company that I liked. Their values were aligned with mine. I liked where they were going in the building trade. And the focus was on, with this podcast, is, Michael, we could do it in-house, but we'd rather have you do it. Are you interested? And that's basically the genesis of Builder Straight Talk, following their tenets, which were, how can we get information out to builders? And that's what I'm doing, speaking with guys like you, like taking your experience and digging down and trying to find those golden nuggets, if you will, that we can share with other builders that they're on the fence. Maybe they want to take it to that next level, but they don't know how to get there, right? And I think Tony Robbins had that expression that success leaves clues. Well, I'm hoping that I don't create a crime scene here. I'm hoping that I can, glean enough information for you to share with them that they can have successful careers, right? And then, obviously too, that I'm trying to introduce sound capital to a whole new generation of people that are out there. So that's kind of the upside. But I've got a question for you. We've been together now for an hour, and you've been interviewed several times. I know that. If you were sitting here behind the microphone talking to yourself, and I'm sure there's numerous times you're talking to yourself, what would be that one question that you want to ask that nobody's asked you before?
Well, you're right about one thing. I do talk to myself. Every time I need good advice, I talk to myself. That's a joke. I think it would be very interesting if someone asked me, because I don't think anybody's ever asked me, why do you do it? Why do you do it?
All right, let's cue that up. Kyle, why do you do what you do?
I love starting with nothing and creating something, and know, because I put in that effort to know that the quality of life has drastically improved for that individual in a home that I created.
Is it fair to say that you want to leave a legacy behind?
Yes.
See, there's a difference between driving by an office building and say, sunny Jim, I used to work on that floor in a cubicle down that hallway, versus driving down a subdivision and say, I built that.
Yep, 100%.
That family that's out there, I built that.
That's right.
That's got to warm your heart every time you drive by and see something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And every time I hear it, he's a great builder, he's a great guy, all the things. I mean, it all just kind of, that's the stuff that money can't buy, right? And it's not that you do it for glory or fame or anything like that, or maybe even legacy, but it's just, if your heart's in the right place, I think everything else will work out for you.
Would you consider yourself a spiritual guy, religious guy?
Yes.
It's interesting what you said there about talking to yourself. Once upon a time, I was going through, let's say, issues, for lack of a better word. Every morning I'd get up at 6:00 and I'd go for a walk, and it'd be about 5 miles back and forth. And I called them my conversations with God, because I would pose a question, and then somewhere in that walk, and again, I live in the country, so I got trees and rivers and everything. It'd be like somebody was talking to me. There would be an answer that would manifest. And I'm not saying it's the answer that I wanted to hear, but there would definitely be an answer. And I called that my conversations with God, incorporated in a walk every day. You strike me as the same kind of guy.
100%. I talk to God several times a day. I thank him every morning for waking me up. I thank him for every blessing that he's ever bestowed upon me. I pray for strength to basically be able to get through the day and the challenges that construction face. I talk to God at lunchtime. I talk to God in the afternoon, at night. I mean, he's my best friend. So,
yeah. I interviewed a builder out of Arizona, just close to Sedona. His name's Jim Lawler. And he said there came a point, things were tough. He made it through 3 recessions where he said, I'm dedicating this to God. I said, that's interesting, Jim. Like, I know Jesus was a carpenter, but I don't think you're calling him for building advice. Right. Like, what do you mean when you dedicate it? He says, we're going to do everything for God's glory, and he's going to help us along the way. And I thought, man, that a leap of faith. Has there ever been a time in your career, building career, when you thought your back is against the wall? What am I doing here? I can't go on. Has that ever happened? And then,
I don't think that's ever really crossed my mind. I tend to be a little more of a positive individual, and I try to look at everything, every situation, the glass half full.
Okay.
So I never really allowed my mind to be put in that position to be back against the wall, if that makes sense. But building and doing things for God, I commend him. The 3D printed community that we're trying to do in Garner, North Carolina, 350 homes. Essentially my motivation behind the project is, I come from a military family, military background. My son is serving right now, and he's in Texas. For every 39 homes, 3D printed homes that we can sell, we're going to donate one entirely free to a disabled veteran. And we're reaching out to organizations like Gary Sensi's Foundation, the Wounded Warrior Project, to try to, gauge basically that individual, because obviously we want to make sure it goes to someone who really needs it, and, all of the things. But disabled veterans, play a huge part in that decision. For me, my brother is a disabled vet. So I think that, again, I kind of circle back to it. I think that if your heart is in the right place, everything else will end up working out for you.
I like that. It's what you think about, what you think about, you bring about. So if you're thinking negative and I'm defeated, guess what? You will be. Have you thought about me reaching out to Mike Rowe? This seems like it'd be a perfect topic for him, this whole idea of the 3D printed home and all the problems that it solves.
No, I haven't. That's actually an interesting point. I'm gonna take that down.
There you go. Anything I can do to help you out, my friend?
Yeah, at some point I'd love to have a conversation more about Sound Capital. You seem like a great guy, and this is a great conversation, and I'm certainly open to extending our talks together.
Well, spring's going to be coming soon. I'm going to have to do a road trip to North Carolina. My brother lives he's in outside of Charlotte. What the
Asheville?
No,
like
Huntersville. No, what the heck is it?
Huntersville.
Huntersville. That's where he is. So he's an odd duck. My parents came off the boat in Ukraine in 1955. And, typical immigrants, they could speak the language. They had the dream. How can we build a better life for our kids? And my dad, struggled, learned trades, and he got to the point where he owned his own air compressor company and became an importing stuff from Korea. Like the guy was a mover and a shaker from nothing. And then my brothers and I've got two brothers, sister, we would work there during the summers, and we'd rip apart compressors and put it back together. And he instilled in us, number one, the self-reliance, number two, entrepreneurship and family. Like those were his core values, right? So there wasn't a summer day when my brother and I weren't covered in oil, ripping something apart. And just to show how naive we are, we were using stuff like Toluol to wipe it off, which now we know is a carcinogenic, but who knew back then? But he had this weird quality that technically he had that other gear in his head that he could just look at something in his mind. He already had it taken apart and put back together. Yeah. And he got hired by Ingersoll Rand out of Carolina. Okay. And so they actually recruited him. They came to Canada and they hauled his ass up there because he was an engineer. But what he had was that ability to walk onto the shop floor and be able to talk to the guy with the greasy rag and a tool, and then be able to go up the elevator to the executive level and talk to the CEO at the same time. He just had that skill set, So you kind of strike me as the same, that you're like this chameleon that can mold to whatever the situation is. And I guess that's a roundabout way of saying I thank you for your time. I think this could be the genesis of a good friendship, and anything I can do to help you out, my friend, I'm a phone call away.
Mike, I appreciate it. It's been great.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Say hi to your mom. I hope her ankle gets a speedy recovery. And again, anything you need, I'm here for you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Builder Straight Talk. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. Until next time, keep building smarter. This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.